Hello and welcome to another jungle video, and in this one we are going to be talking about advanced pathing practices. And no, I'm not talking about the routes you start with, we're talking about all the pathing practices that you use to gank, to counter jungle, to move around the map, as well as the decisions you make in your jungle philosophy. When you make a play in the mid lane, where do you go afterwards and why, when, how? We're going to talk about a whole bunch of things, quadrant clearing, umbrella jungling, loop pathing, spaghetti pathing. We'll give core examples of the fundamentals and then dive into a nice challenger gameplay, as well as have other examples from other elos that show you the importance of your advanced jungle practices in order to actually carry games from the jungle position. So as always, if your brain is juiced and ready to absorb information and critically think, don't forget to please like and subscribe if you enjoy the video and the content. I have the gameplay channel for full champion-based analysis, as well as the Patreon where I upload a lot of my coaching. And now, without hesitation, let's begin. And before we get into our gameplay and core examples, I want to highlight a few things that I've come up with in terms of terminology that really isolates things you need to implement into your game in order to actually navigate the variety of scenarios you might actually find yourself in. Now, when we talk about full clear sequencing, when we talk about quadrant clearing, we're talking about avoiding situations where you have spaghetti pathing. This is basically something you should aim never to do. It basically means if you are looking to take all your camps in one rotation, for example, Krugs, Raptors, Wolves, and Gromp, that you do it in an order that means you do not retrace your steps. Quadrant clearing means simply to take one of the four corners of the jungle off of the map. In this case, I could take Krugs and Raptors, that's one quadrant cleared. The next one will be Wolves and Gromp, and obviously you can throw in your buffs where applicable. The thing is, if you're going to clear a quadrant before you go back to base, this is pretty simple. I'll do Krugs, I'll do Raptors, off I go back to base. This means you can come out of the base and go and do Wolves and Gromp, and then maybe do a Dragon, gank bottom lane, and when you eventually reset, all your camps will spawn in that order so you can go Krugs, Raptors, Wolves, Gromp for a full sequence. Spaghetti pathing simply means, hey, you know what, all my camps are up, I kinda wanna take them all, and I'm gonna go to Wolves and Gromp. There's nothing really on the bottom side. Now time to go to Raptors. You are retracing your steps and wasting valuable seconds being inefficient. You decided out of base you wanted to path upwards. Why did we go down the middle to Wolves and Gromp instead of through the side into Gromp, Wolves, Raptors, Krugs? Any jungler that does this will lose time, lose tempo, and not be able to convert objectives and ganks when they should have been able to. Now, umbrella jungling is what I've termed safety pathing. I did an animation of this a while back, I'll simply reuse it here. The concept is, if you lose the jungle matchup, like a Graves, and you happen to be a Fiddlesticks or Karthus or something that just loses 1v1 because the enemy team has a whole bunch of lane prio, you have to path in accordance with the fact that you do not have control of the rivers and the entrances to your jungle. This means you need to maintain pathing that makes it kind of look like some kind of weirdly shaped umbrella. This is crucial if you are losing any matchup or simply not in a position to fight due to numbers disadvantage or simply due to golden experience disadvantage. Something like this can happen as early as level 1. Look at this Kha'Zix. He knows that it's warded by his Raptor Pit. Now, what can Kha'Zix do for a clear? He can definitely 5 camp, he can definitely 3 camp, he can 4 camp. It all depends on the game plan of the player. Now, at this stage, he's against a Nunu. If the Nunu's bottom lane will have prio, and then he sees the Kha'Zix go by the Raptor Pit due to the ward, all of a sudden the Kha'Zix could be looking at a 3v1 in his blue side jungle. He loses camps, he loses buffs, and if the Nunu's a good gamer, he's simply gonna take the bottom crab, run across mid lane, take the other crab, and now has complete dominion pathing over invading and securing his own camps. So what the Kha'Zix does is say, you know what, I'm gonna do my red, and I'm gonna walk around the back of the wall so that you do not see where I'm going. Now from the Nunu's perspective, this might look like the Kha'Zix is simply going to Krugs. And all of a sudden, instead of simply having a straight up invade of the Kha'Zix, he has no idea what his exact game plan is or what he wants to do. And that's why the safe umbrella jungling that relies on you sort of lane ganking and attacking those side lanes is great when you don't have mid prio and you don't beat the enemy jungler 1v1. I will link a more in-depth video where we talked about core gameplay examples for that in the description below. But these things, quadrant clearing, full sequencing, all of these random pathing names, what do they actually mean in terms of real world jungling? Well, I'm glad you asked because we have scenarios. Now lately in pro play and high elo, you've seen a lot of what you're gonna see on your screen now. Obviously not with these champions, it would have been Udyr and Hecarim in pretty much every game. Maybe we can even throw in a Lilia. The thing is, you're watching a Kha'Zix start top side, wanting to do a 5 camp, you've got Volibear starting on the bottom side, wanting to do a full clear. Simply put, the junglers are gonna rinse clears opposite to each other. The Kha'Zix flexes and adapts his pathing knowing he cannot 6 camp as fast as the Volibear, and therefore will skip the Krugs in order to do the bottom crab at the same time that Volibear does the top crab. At this point, the junglers have a few options. Kha'Zix can wait until around 4 minutes or 5 where the second tier Grump will spawn. Volibear can do the same thing, and now you've got a pseudo-vertical jungling where both junglers are quadrant clearing their opposite sides. It's not very exciting, it's not very dynamic. If the enemy laner is good, they can ward and protect themselves against a dive. However, if it's unleashed and you're being pushed in, you're gonna get dove. Kha'Zix in the meantime can simply take his Krugs, reset, and then repeat the sequence. In non-high elo gameplays, and that was Canyon by the way, this sort of pathing doesn't really work as well because you have to adapt your game plan and adjust your advanced pathing decisions based on how the game actually evolves, and in turn forcing you to decide, should I be clearing my quadrant, should I be counter jungling, where should I be looking to do things. And sometimes these advanced pathing practices and techniques can provide you with totally different ideas about how to execute a game plan. As an example from a coaching session, we have a Hecarim who did a full sequence up on the first rotation, and we have a Mundo on the other side who does a full clear, basically looking for the same goals. Mundo took the top crab, they all met top lane, both junglers died. Basically a little bit of a fiesta, but the important thing is what they do next. Hecarim respawned, went to the bottom crab, and immediately fell back to his Grump. Because both junglers are heading in the same direction and we know the Mundo by our number tracking did a full clear first in addition to a crab because you'll have that 28 CS, all of a sudden because the bottom lane is pushing, you can understand that Mundo 100% will look to do his second spawn Krugs and or gank bottom lane. This is a jungle tracking and anticipation play. This means that while you might feel compelled to do your Grump and Wolves to finish the quadrant, we have to react to information on the map and try and make a play ourselves. Now instead of ganking on the bottom side, he chooses to go to the mid lane and clean up a nice 1v1. There is a school of thought that says if I have the right runes and I'm in the right position, I can counter gank bot and still rotate to the mid lane, but let's assume in this case that you decided to forsake bottom lane to their own demons and instead head directly to the mid lane to get a kill on the Echo. This is where your jungle pathing understanding is really tested, and I'd like to use a clip from the coaching in order to actually explain what happened. Okay, so you choose to go to Raptors, and then Wolves, because we see them going to go here. What we need to think about in this situation is there's no way they are going to do Dragon right now because the cannon was really low. They're pushing up bottom lane. Yeah. And now they're going to need to reset. So the logic of, hey, I just want to loop path around in case they decide to converge is not the right decision, but it can be the right decision for a different reason. I took Grump. I did or did not gank bottom lane. Gank mid lane, we get a kill, huzzah, go us. I go Raptors, I know bottom lane is shoving and we'll have to reset, and I just saw Mundo go from Krugs to bottom lane to my Krugs to my Grump to walking across this wall to his Raptors. Now the Mundo very easily could say, let me stick around and do the dragon, but the bottom lane just reset right now. He'd be wasting a hell of a lot of time, and if you show up with the freshly juiced bottom lane, he dies, and you give him, and you get the dragon. So he almost has to go up. If you were thinking about that, okay, let's loop this, and now we can do the dragon. Because my bottom lane is fresh, and their bottom lane has to go back to base. So you have a free dragon right now. Because all of a sudden, by taking this, right, you'll have enough time to take your blue. If enough time had transpired and the Grump is up, you can secure that also. Then, if you felt like staying a little longer with your ult, you could gank bottom lane. So that's an extended sequence. You'd be out a long time, but you're Hecarim. You can be. Then you can reset, and now Herald invades, dives, camps, and then you just repeat the process 3 times and you win the game. We really have to consider like 3 or 4 possibilities at any given moment. For example, you chose to ignore bottom lane because screw them. Let me save this guy. You got to this point. We just see Mundo bottom lane. We see him visually, confirmation. They're low. They have to base. There's nothing here for me. He's gonna sequence up. He did a full sequence up. So why don't I just go take his tier 2 wolves and tier 2 Grump? That's a play that you could have made. Yeah. And this is good, and this is good. Because by taking it away, he's gonna go here, nothing. He's gonna go here and take this. Then he's gonna walk up here and there's nothing. And then once you've done that and gank top lane, you can do your Krugs and your Raptors, back to base, level 6, steamroll, ult bottom lane, take the dragon, and then full sequence again. Then you can do Herald, top lane gank. It's a completely different game style or play style that we just described with the dragon. In this next example, also from my coaching game I had, we have a Fiddlesticks, he full sequences, obviously. He managed to get a crab, he stole the second spawn of the Grump because the enemy jungler entered mid lane, and now is at a crossroads. Should you finish your quadrant on the red side before you go back to base? I think at this point it's very obvious that if you take the Krugs and Raptors, your highest spawning camps, when they respawn again, they're going to be even higher level and thus be really valuable. The issue is when you go back to base after this, if you head topside and the enemy jungler path's bottom, you might lose a dragon, your bottom lane might be ganked. You could, however, head directly to the bottom side dragon and secure it, and then base your next decision on where you saw the enemy jungler. If they go topside and have really weird pathing, okay, so my quadrant clearing on the bottom side gave me a lot of experience, I did the dragon, I see the enemy jungler topside, and because of this, I can take his second spawn blue, I can take his third spawn Grump, and now I can ult dive bottom lane because they're low under tower. Then you can reset and have total top control over your top camps as well as the herald. However, you have another school of thought that says, alright, if I do that, and he did, you're giving up a lot of respawn experience on the top side. Therefore, instead of doing the Krugs and Raptors, go back to base, move topside, take the crab, take your Grump, Wolves, Raptors. Don't feel compelled to do the Krugs, they're far out of the way. At this point, you're 100% level 6. Assuming the enemy jungler randomly does whatever he thinks is right like he did in the actual game, you would easily have prior on counter jungling the blue and Grump, diving bottom lane, then securing the dragon. You can then take your Krugs, which would be the second spawn, finishing off with your third spawn Raptors as 2 minutes should have transpired. You can go back to base, and now you have once again dominion over the top side, except as you go straight for the herald, when you fall back to your blue camps, this would be a third spawn Grump, a third spawn wolf camp, and your blue buff would have just arrived as well. However, full clearing and doing this sort of thing is kinda easy. What happens if we have a challenger level Rek'Sai against an Udyr? Now, we know the Udyr starts in the red buff thanks to a ward, and it shows the importance of wards as Udyr has it stolen by the Pantheon and will gank top after Krugs to retrieve it. Rek'Sai has multiple decisions to make. You see, in this situation, because you did your Raptors third, and you did your Krugs second, that means the Krugs will spawn at around 4 or 5, for example, the Raptors around 229. If you decide to simply gank mid lane, take the top crab, do your blue Grump Wolves, the Raptors won't be up in time for you to sequence. I mean, it can be if you spend your time ganking, pushing the wave, you go top lane, etc., but it's not always guaranteed, and it's not always the best choice for a ganking jungler. However, when Rek'Sai sees the Udyr go top lane and most likely go back to base afterwards, we can simply decide, hey, we created mid prior with our gank, let's go ahead and take the blue buff. Now, in higher elos, you're gonna see the kind of dives you're watching on your screen now. It gets messy, they get out, the Udyr is actually able to absorb some experience, and he dies. Here again is where you have to consider full sequencing, quadrant clearing, and denying the enemy jungler any sort of rights to existence. We use the fact that our ADC is still alive and get that bottom crab. We move back into our jungle for safety, and our Rek'Sai hits the plant to see the Udyr going back to the Grump. What do you do in this situation? Do you decide, hey, I will clear my tier 2 Raptors and my tier 2 Krugs and go back to base, I'm good. The problem then is you're giving him tempo advantage of doing his blue side quadrant into the crab, into potentially, if he has lane prio, invading your blue side, or simply just taking his red side and catching up a little bit. The Rek'Sai decides, you know what, I'm actually gonna stay out, go straight to the top side crab because I have that advantage, and then she can translate that to a gank on the top side, which was the unfortunate recipient of a level 2 Udyr gank. Brilliant, now we can go back to base and then do a full sequence, right? You see, this isn't quite like the Fiddlesticks example. In this situation, the Udyr has full sequenced up. If you go back to base now, especially with Envision, not using good pathing practices from the intro, then the Udyr will simply take your blue, take your Grump, take your Wolves. This might not seem like a big thing, but they are still very important experience takes we need to secure on our own timers so they can respawn at a higher level. Which means it's okay in this situation to actually stay out, do blue Grump Wolves, and then reset. Now in this situation, the Rek'Sai stays out to take the Raptors as well. There can be two reasons for this. One, she wants to wait until she has a little more gold for an extra longsword, a control ward, maybe some boots. Or you're simply worried that because your mid lane is going back to base, the enemy Ryze might decide to, shove and then steal your Raptors. However, I do think in this situation, simply doing your blue side quadrant, resetting because you're already 6, and then heading to the bottom side where you can take the crab, gank bot, gank mid, take the dragon, take the rest of your red side cams, and then swap it over and do the same thing on the top side for the herald will be the objective. Now, while the order of events is always subject to the game state and what champions you have and where the enemy jungler is, the Rek'Sai does achieve exactly what she wants, and now basically the game, because it's a Korean challenger game, snowballs in blue team's advantage. But hopefully you understand the pros and cons of full sequencing in these different examples. Hopefully you understand the concept of sometimes it's okay to take one camp from a quadrant if you're looking just to simply path through those directions to get to an objective, to get to counter jungling, to get to a gank. And then of course, always remember while you're doing these things, don't spaghetti path and don't compromise your full sequence and quadrant clears when you don't have to, especially if you are a farming jungler and you can simply take them after doing something on the map, or you can do them before your ult is up. You can see, despite the fact that one of these examples was platinum and one of them was bronze, the fundamentals of these pathing techniques, and even if they're kind of advanced for certain elos, all hold true, and the fundamentals hold true throughout your climb in ranked. The concept of cutting out camps and rotations to maximize counter jungling at objectives. The concept of looping back around in order to secure an objective because the enemy won't expect it. The concept of counter jungling because you decided to go upwards instead of bottom side, which would then lead to further advantages down the line. I try to cut up the times and make it somewhat logical in terms of progression in this video. I know there's a lot of advanced concepts and pathings, but I hope you're able to actually understand the examples and where to apply them. These are important concepts to think about as a jungler all the time, always adapting your pathing, thinking about the different things, where do I want to go, and how do I get there. It's definitely something that thrives in a coaching sense because you can spend 20-30 minutes talking about all the options. A link for that is below if anyone is interested. Thank you very much for watching. Please do like, share, and comment if you enjoyed and learned something. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you think the content is worthy. Remember, comb your beards because those mustn't look like spaghetti either. And as always, I will see you all in the next tutorial.